The West Bank, long defined by conflict, occupation and human resilience, is once again at the center of a defining moment. This Sunday, the Israeli cabinet is set to hold a crucial session that many analysts view as a prelude to Israeli annexation of the West Bank, a move that could dramatically reshape the political landscape of the Middle East. For Palestinians, the looming annexation comes on top of the ongoing Israeli raids, as well as a settlement expansion, threatening to shut the door on the already fragile prospects for peace and any hope of an independent Palestinian state. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's settlement policy has grown more explicit as he openly rallies settlers and signals that annexation is no longer a distant plan, but an imminent reality. Meanwhile, Palestinian resistance continues across towns and refugee camps from Jerusalem to Jenin, where clashes with Israeli forces highlight the volatility of the moment. The pressing question remains: if annexation proceeds, what will it mean for Palestinians, for the region's fragile stability, and for the international community's stance on a conflict that continues to define the Middle East? Welcome to In Depth. The Guardian has reported that the Israeli occupation army launched an operation involving dozens of soldiers and armored vehicles in the old city of Nablus, in the northern occupied West Bank. Soldiers stormed several neighborhoods at the old city, which has a population of about 30,000 people, searching houses and shops, while some houses have been turned into military posts. Nablus Governor Ghassan Dardes said that the assault on Nablus is merely a show of force with no justification. Local sources said clashes broke out at the eastern entrance of the old city, where young people threw stones at Israeli soldiers who responded with tear gas and live ammunition. The Palestinian Red Crescent reported several injuries as a result, but none from gunfire. The old city of Nablus has been the focus of several major Israeli raids, including in 2022 and 2023 during large-scale operations, as well as in 2002 during the Second Palestinian Intifada. In early June 2025, the Israeli army carried out an operation there in which at least 2 Palestinians were killed. To understand the shifting ground beneath the Middle East, both militarily and politically, we're turned to the two voices from within the heart of this unfolding crisis in the region. From Cairo, we're joined by Mohammed Osman, an international relations specialist, and Samir Bahra, a political analyst from Jenin. Thank you both for joining us here on In Depth. Let's start off with you, Mr. Osman. Now, what possible justifications can the Israelis give for the annexation of the West Bank, which of course does not have Hamas or is governed by Hamas at all?
Thank you for having me, Raham. The Israelis right now are not really worried anymore, or they do not care anymore to attempt to formulate or bring about any pretexts in order to carry out their sinister plans of expansion and eventual annexation. The Israelis right now are have a very blunt open policy, a very overtly expansionist policy, and they speak very publicly that they will deny the Palestinians any chances of potential statehood, and that they are, in fact, very interested in the idea of Greater Israel, and there is something that now has become part of the official Israeli discourse. And of course, Greater Israel is Israel plus the remaining 22% of historical Palestine, which is the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza, and even beyond that, in the territories of Syria and Lebanon, and maybe even Jordan. So the Israelis right now are eyeing the West Bank. The Israeli Knesset has issued a resolution that recommended that the government declare sovereignty over the West Bank. The Israeli government very soon will discuss the possibility of declaring sovereignty over the West Bank. There have been propositions even about a partial annexation of parts of the West Bank, at least the areas where the illegal Israeli settlements have been built. And of course, we should know that over 600,000 to 700,000 Israeli settlers live inside the West Bank in dozens of, in hundreds of settlements, small and big settlements. So it seems that the Israelis are moving towards this idea. And now even the Israeli government is speaking that maybe declaring sovereignty or annexing the West Bank will be a reply or a punishment directed towards those European countries and Western countries that have decided to unilaterally recognize Palestine, even though Palestine is recognized already before the 7th of October by over 140 countries and is an observer state has an observer status in the United Nations. So it seems that the Israelis do not care about that. They do not care about international law anymore. They do not care to pay attention to any legal obligations that they might be violating by undertaking such schemes. And they are moving forward with their plans of expansion. They are committing genocide in Gaza. They are planning to occupy permanently parts of the Gaza Strip, maybe even annex them. This was stated officially by Israelis. And the same is happening in the West Bank, which is the ultimate prize that the Israelis seek. They call it Judea and Samaria by the biblical terms.
Yeah.
And of course, it has very strong religious significance to many Israeli religious extremists and extremist nationalists.
Well, Mr. Osman, we're going to get back to that idea again and discuss it further, the whole idea of killing the Palestinian state. But let's get Mr. Abara's opinion here. Now, how do you, sir, see or assess the Israeli cabinet's upcoming session on the West Bank sovereignty? What does this actually signal or send out militarily on the ground to those living in the West Bank and the possibility of further violence there?
Greetings to you and to your audience and to our other honorable guest, Dr. Ahmed Osman. First of all, the West Bank wasn't part of the Israeli project since the war on Gaza declared. And up until now, the Israeli violations are still ongoing. The settlers are now talking about the E1, which is the construction of the Mali Adumir settlement, which will separate the West Bank's north and south. It will be separated into two areas, a northern West Bank and a southern West Bank. They are trampling on the Palestinians' national rights. Also, there are signals that were shown earlier and have now augmented through the threatening of European nations to recognize Palestine, Israel saw that as a threat. They do not want a Palestinian state to be recognized, so they said if you are to recognize Palestine, we will annex the West Bank. This is a thorny issue. Yes.
I'm sorry, Mr. Al-Mahra, we're just going to have to cut you off there because we have to go to a live transmission of the Security Council where the Secretary General Antonio Guterres is giving his speech.
Settler violence, demolitions, and discriminatory policies are driving displacement and deepening vulnerability. The relentless expansion of settlements is fracturing communities and cutting off access to vital resources. The recent approval of a plan for the construction of thousands of settlements in the EU area would effectively separate the northern and southern West Bank, an existential threat to the two-state solution. I repeat, the Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, have been established and are being maintained in violation of international law. Israel must cease such actions and comply with its obligations. There is no military solution to the conflict. I appeal once again for an immediate and permanent ceasefire and further humanitarian access across Gaza and the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages. Starvation of the civilian population must never be used as a method of warfare. Civilians must be protected, humanitarian access must be unimpeded. No more excuses, no more obstacles, no more lies. Thank you.
Secretary General of the UN, Antonio Guterres, where he discussed the West Bank's expansion of settlements there, of hundreds of settlements under E1, and how this could kill the two-state solution, and it is illegal under international law and should not happen. In addition to the fact that he talked about the Gaza Strip and that there should be an immediate and unconditional ceasefire, as well as the release of all detainees, and to not use starvation as a weapon of war, which is also illegal under international law. And now back to our program. Mr. Osman, if we can get your take here. Now, you spoke a bit about the idea, which the Secretary General talked about, killing the two-state solution. Now, what does the announced meeting reveal about the political pressures within the Netanyahu coalition, especially from far-right factions? Do you think that the far-right will continue to pressure Netanyahu to basically continue on with the plan to kill the two-state solution? Mr. Osman, I'm not sure if you got me there, but
yes, I did. Excuse me, the connection was a bit unstable.
No problem.
I think that General Abahara, just before we went to see the speech of the Secretary General of the United Nations, we saw that he pointed out to the very dangerous development of the E3 building of settlement, or the new settlement expansion that is taking place, and basically it seeks to bisect the West Bank in half, basically denying the Palestinians definitively any stance of eventual statehood, and that is what forced the UN Secretary General to address this matter very urgently from the UN headquarters in the United Nations. However, unfortunately, the United Nations can do very little in order to stop the vile actions of the Israeli occupation. Unfortunately, the Israeli occupation has this sense of impunity. They feel emboldened. They are acting with impunity because the United States provide them with unconditional support and unconditional political cover, unfortunately. And as long as the other international actors in the international community, whether the European Union, major Western countries like Australia or Canada, other countries like India, Russia, and China, these other major powers, if they do not come together in order to collectively pressure Israel in a meaningful way, like economic sanctions or whatnot, I do not believe that Israel can be stopped without this very decisive action
So I'm
that
sorry
is
to cut you
needed
off there,
by
Mr.
the
Osman, but
international.
you think that basically, as you said, there have been numerous statements from the UN regarding Gaza and the West Bank. Now, do you think that they're not going to be very effective in at least shifting the international community's opinion when it comes to the Israelis, whereby they could pressure other partners into taking action against Israel?
It will definitely serve to apply more pressure on Israel. It will definitely portray Israel more as a pariah state, as an outlaw, and they are a pariah state, indeed, a rogue state that does not subscribe to international law and abide by its rules in any sense or manner, unfortunately. However, as I said, the UN's power has its very own limitations. Of course, it will only taint Israel as an outlaw country, as a country that is in violation, grave violation of international humanitarian law and international human rights law and international law in general and the UN Charter itself. However, if the other states, who are the actual power brokers in the international arena, are reluctant to take any action to punish Israel and pressure it in order to put an end to its violations or at scale back its violations, I don't think that the UN can do much. And I do not want to blame the United Nations or allot to them responsibilities that they do not bear, because they basically do not possess the tools in order to penalize Israel or pressure it. However, the UN, as a technical body and as an international organization right now, is completely aligned with international law and Palestinian rights, and they do act very strongly against in documenting and speaking out against Israeli violations. However, of course, without, as I said, the cooperation of states, that the states will translate this condemnation of the Israeli conduct into actual measures to penalize the Israelis and to pressure them, I don't think anything substantial will happen on the ground, unfortunately, Rehan.
Okay, Mr. Abahar, if we can get your opinion now. In Jenin and across the northern West Bank cities, raids have been a routine thing there. What's the strategic aim behind these operations other than the expansion of settlements? Do you think this is to somehow get at the morale of local Palestinians and to stop them from wanting to resist?
The Israeli politics, which have been ongoing for decades now, is the same. In Gaza, first, they want to eliminate the possibility of the establishment of a Palestinian state and its recognition worldwide. So, geographically speaking, without geographical communication between Gaza and the West Bank, it will be impossible to establish a Palestinian state. A Palestinian state must be established as per the Borders Resolution of 1967. The West Bank, truthfully, Israel is centered within the West Bank more than it is in Gaza. Israel have been long regarding the West Bank in light of religious pretexts. It is very important to them because it includes Judah and Samaria, which are significant regions for the Israelis. That's why they have long started building settlements from the south, from the extreme south to the far north. They also want to prevent the establishment and wide international recognition of the Palestinian state. They want to waive its sovereignty and annex the West Bank and occupy it. Supposedly, the reactions should be angrier because the Israelis have committed vile atrocities and monstrous crimes. We saw states taking action, but they have not reached the resolution to impose sanctions on Israel. We want the EU, we want the EU to impose sanctions on Israel, but unfortunately, a clear reaction isn't existent. They might impose lightly, light sanctions. They might pull some investments. These are possibilities. But other than that, I don't think the Europeans will impose any sanctions on Israel. The Europeans also fear Trump's reaction if they were to impose sanctions on Israel, because they will not be able to impose or hold Israel accountable as per these sanctions.
Okay, Mr. Osman, you heard Mr. Bahar there agreeing with you basically that there's not enough being done by the international community. And Israel, obviously, as you said, has operated with complete impunity in this regard to international law. Now, if they move towards annexing the West Bank, will they face some sort of international backlash if they declare some sort of sovereignty on the West Bank? Do you think, for instance, that the European sanctions will take effect more seriously, or will there be more pressure from Western partners?
Hopefully, I hope so. I cannot say what the Europeans will do exactly. Maybe they will think more seriously about applying sanctions, but I will have to agree more with General Abahra, actually, because the Americans will always be there to protect this, and the Europeans will be very eager not to anger the Americans, especially a volatile, like an administration or a president with the temperament of Donald Trump. They will be very eager not to anger him over any sensitive subjects. And definitely Israel-Palestine is a very sensitive subject for the Trump administration. They seem to be completely consumed by the Zionist agenda, unfortunately. They seem, even some of the Trump administration and the supporters of the Trump administration within the political class seem to be committed more to this agenda than many of members of the Israeli government even. So it's rather impossible to see how they would stand and let the Europeans apply any form of hard pressure on the Israelis. The Europeans, of course, have a moral obligation to stand up to the slogans they always love to propagate: human rights, freedoms, liberties. This needs to translate into action on the ground. The blood of a Palestinian child is not less valuable than the blood of a Ukrainian child, for example. So therefore, they should be much more decisive in their actions against the Israelis. However, Rehan, let's think about it for a bit. They did not apply sanctions on Israel when it's actively, as we speak, committing genocide in Gaza, killing over 63 documented people in Gaza. About 80% of them are innocent civilians, at least, and probably the number is much higher since there are tens of thousands of missing persons. So probably the actual number is over 100,000. So if they said nothing about exterminating a substantial portion of the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip, would you think that they would really care very much about Israel legalizing its de facto acquisition of territory and annexation in the West Bank that has already been ongoing over the past 50 years, since 1967, basically? I highly doubt that they would be prompted to take any decisive action. If they do, I would be surprised, and I would be very delighted, and I would be very grateful if they do. However, I do believe that there are sharp divisions within the European Union. Some European countries are very eager to sanction Israel, like Spain, for example, and maybe even Ireland. And those countries recognize Palestine and are very harsh on the Israelis. Other countries try to stand somewhere in the middle, like the European, like the French, for example, and the United Kingdom, another significant European power. They pledge to recognize Palestine, yet they are reluctant to apply sanctions. And the biggest European economic powerhouse, Germany, is completely pro-Israel. You don't have to worry about that. And several other European countries. And this is what is actually impeding the European Union and preventing it from taking even simple measures, as suspending the association agreement, for example, with Israel. So unfortunately, I do not expect a lot from the Europeans, and I would have to agree with General Abahra in this regards.
Well, Mr. Abaha, now you heard what Mr. Mohammed Osman there. He is not very optimistic about the future of a two-state solution or anyone holding the Israelis accountable. Now, does Israel's current military strategy suggest possible preparations for a wider confrontation after the annexation?
Israel doesn't bat an eye for the international law or the international organizations. They hold no significance for Israel because they are always protected by the American veto. And they are implementing the American policy within the region. Trump, months ago, have been talking about the war. The last statement he issued was about the war, that he wishes to the return of detainees. But he did not present solutions for the Palestinian people. Netanyahu and the US, they have an ongoing agenda.
There seems to be a technical problem. If we could talk to Mr. Mohammed Osman there, since Mr. Abahra has a problem there. Now, let me ask you, sir, considering the fragile Israeli political landscape, how sustainable is Netanyahu's push for the annexation in the face of political backlash? Do you believe that he will not be able to do this push?
Actually, I believe that pushing for the annexation of the West Bank will only strengthen Netanyahu's political position domestically. This is something that has garnered the consensus of the Israeli political class. Even Netanyahu's staunchest opponents have voted in favor of annexing the West Bank in the Knesset. So we should not even dream about these illusions that we have been singing for the past few months, that, oh, Israel will implode from within and the Israeli opposition will overthrow Netanyahu. I think we should stop being naive. I think we should stop being superficial. I think we should stop even paying attention to many reports in the Israeli media that tend to exaggerate such political divisions, because at the end of the day, taking the disagreements between the Israelis is not on the subject of the Palestinians. All of them despise the Palestinians. All of them, the entire Israeli political class at this point, most of the political parties represented in the Knesset oppose the two-state solution.
So basically, they're just in opposition of how they're going to reach the expansion of Israel rather than the idea of it.
It is a debate between pragmatism and extremism, However, that does not mean that they do not share the ultimate goal. So if Netanyahu takes such a very strong makes such a very strong push, criminal push, of course, for the annexation of the West Bank and eliminating the possibility of any future Palestinian statehood, of course they will support them. We also saw how they reacted, for example, when Israel attacked Iran. Everyone in Israel supported Netanyahu in this measure. The only divisions they have over Gaza is the safety of the detainees and the hostages. Some of them do care about the lives of the hostages, others don't. So that's the
only difference. Yes.
Yes, that's the only difference. However, when it comes to Arab rights, Palestinian rights, no one in Israel cares. We should get this into our minds and understand this so that we can conceive the gravity of the situation we are in.
Okay, if we can get Mr. Abaha's opinion now. From your strategic viewpoint, what is Israel's aim to achieve how are they going to achieve a long-term annexation of the West Bank? How are they going to do this?
They want to hold sovereignty over the West Bank, but it doesn't also mean the occupation. They can control it. They can install checkpoints. The issue of the full annexation of the West Bank, it might pose as a challenge, an economic challenge in regards of the budgets to the Israeli cabinet. So if the Arab region and the international community had a unified political movement, we can stop them from the full annexation. They are now aware of this equation that the Arabs are moving to prevent them from annexing the West Bank, but they might control the passages, the cities in the West Bank. It might be viewed as an occupation, but it's not a full annexation. So right now on the ground, it depends on what they want.
Well,
The Israelis
yes. Well, I unfortunately am out of time. I get your point there that it is basically about strengthening the West Bank and forcing people to basically leave. Thank you so much, both of you, Mr. Mohammed Osman, an international relations specialist, and Samir Abahir, a political analyst, for sharing your vital perspectives on the West Bank's issues. This brings us to the end of today's episode of In Depth. I'm Rehan Morsi. Thank you for watching.